From the air, it looks like salvation. A strip of concrete. Home. Safety. The end of another mission where somehow, against every odd, you made it back alive. Until you realize what it actually is. 800 yards. That is all you get. 800 yards to bring 30 tons of damaged bomber from 90 miles per hour to zero. 800 yards where the laws of physics do not care that you survived the flak. Do not care that you dodged the fighters. Do not care that you kept your crew alive over Berlin. 800 yards. And then the world becomes very, very solid. This is a number. Let me give you another one. 1944. Eastern Europe, Allied Air Base. 1 week in November. 23 bombers take off for a raid deep into enemy territory. They face everything you would expect. Anti-aircraft fire that turns the sky into a maze of exploding steel. Enemy fighters that come at them in waves. Mechanical failures at 20,000 feet, where the air is too thin to breathe and too cold to survive. 13 hours later, 23 aircraft return. 23. Every single one makes it back. Damaged, yes. Bleeding fuel, trailing smoke, flying on prayers and fumes. But they make it back. And then, in the span of 6 hours, 7 of them crash. Not shot down. Not lost to the enemy. Not victims of combat. They crash at home. On their own runway. The place that was supposed to be safe. 7 aircraft. Gone. More than were lost to the enemy that day. Let that sink in for a moment. You survive the mission. You bring your crew home. You can see the runway. You are seconds from safety. And that is when it kills you. Now here is where it gets darker. This was not an accident. This was not bad luck. This was not one terrible day. In 1947, 2 years after the war ended, the United States War Department declassified a report. Buried in the middle of that report, in the kind of dry language that governments use when they do not want you to understand what they are really saying, was this. Allied command knew this runway was killing people. They knew it was too short. They knew the numbers did not work. They knew that asking pilots to land combat-damaged heavy bombers on 800 yards of concrete was asking them to do something that physics said should not be possible. And they kept using it anyway. Why? Strategic positioning. The base was in the right place. Moving it would cost money. Extending the runway would take time. And there was a war to win. So they ran the numbers. They did the math. And somewhere, someone in a clean office far from that runway looked at the statistics and wrote down a phrase that should haunt anyone who reads it. Acceptable loss. 43 pilots. Acceptable. Now, if you are watching this and you are thinking that this is just another World War II story about bravery and sacrifice, let me stop you right there, because this is not that kind of story. This is a story about what happens when the danger is not the enemy. It is the final 200 yards. When survival depends not on courage, but on understanding one brutal truth that your instincts, your training, and your experience are all lying to you about. And if you want to know how one pilot figured out how to beat a runway that should have killed him, and why the military buried his solution for 40 years, then you are in the right place. This is World War II Uncovered. I am here every week with the stories they did not tell you in history class. The ones that take decades to declassify. The ones where the truth is messier and stranger and more human than any Hollywood script. If that sounds like your kind of history, go ahead and subscribe. Hit that bell. Because this story is just getting started. And what we are about to uncover gets so much worse before it gets better. Now, back to that runway. November 1944. The 23 bombers are home. Or at least, they are close. Close enough to see the field. Close enough to feel that first rush of relief that maybe, just maybe, they are going to make it. And that relief? That is the first thing that kills you. Because from 1,500 feet, the runway looks longer than it is. Your brain, desperate for good news, after 13 hours of combat, tells you what you want to hear. It looks fine. It looks manageable. Like every other runway you have landed on dozens of times. But it is not. It is 800 yards of unforgiving concrete that ends exactly where your momentum still wants to live. And by the time your brain updates that information, by the time you realize what you are actually looking at, you are already committed. You are already too low to climb back out, too slow to accelerate, too close to abort. You get one approach, one chance, one decision, and everyone watching knows exactly what is about to happen. The ground crew knows. They have seen this before. They will see it again. The tower knows. They are already tensing, waiting for the sound. The other pilots know. Some of them are thinking, There but for the grace of God. And the crew in that aircraft? They know too. Maybe they do not say it out loud. Maybe they just grip their seats a little tighter and go quiet in that way people do when they realize words will not change what is coming. The pilot knows most of all, because he can feel it now. The aircraft is heavy, heavier than it should be. Battle damage adds drag. Extra ammunition loaded at the last minute adds weight. Wounded crew members not accounted for in the calculations add mass. Fuel gauges that lie after violent combat maneuvers add uncertainty. And all of that adds up to one thing. This aircraft needs more runway than it has. But there is no other option. There is no divert field close enough. There is no fuel to reach one if there were. The engines are tired. The crew is exhausted. And this runway, this 800-yard trap, is the only choice left. So, the pilot does what pilots do. He commits, he lines up, he stabilizes his descent. He runs through the procedures he has done 100 times before. And he hopes that this time, somehow, it will be enough. But hope is not a number the runway recognizes. This is the short strip landing that should not have worked. This is the story of why it killed so many. And this is the story of the one pilot who figured out how to survive it and why they tried to bury what he learned. Stay with me, because what happens next changes everything. Here is what makes short runways so deadly. It is not one thing. It is 3 things happening at the same time, and you have to manage all of them perfectly, and if you get even one of them wrong by just a little bit, you die. First, energy. Speed plus weight. Basic physics. A B-17 bomber weighs 30 tons empty. Add fuel, add ammunition, add crew, add equipment, and you are pushing closer to 35 tons. Now you are bringing that mass down from the sky at 90 miles per hour, and you need to get it to 0. That takes distance. That takes time. That takes braking power that, in 1944, you do not really have. Modern aircraft have carbon brakes, anti-skid systems, thrust reversers. They have computers that adjust brake pressure 1,000 times per second to keep you from skidding. They have systems that compensate for asymmetric brake failures. These pilots had drums and friction pads that overheated if you used them too hard, and locked up if you used them too fast, and wore out if you used them too much. Second, distance. You do not have enough. That is the whole problem. 800 yards sounds like a lot until you do the math. At 90 miles per hour, you are covering 132 feet every single second. That is 44 yards. You blink, you lose 44 yards. You touch down at the very beginning of the runway. Perfect landing. No mistakes. You still need to decelerate from 90 to 0 in 800 yards using brakes that barely work. Now add reality. You do not touch down at the beginning. You float for a second, maybe 2, because you came in with just a little too much speed, just to be safe, just to make sure you did not stall. Those 2 seconds? That is 90 yards. Gone. Now you have 710 yards. You touch down, but you bounce slightly because the gear is damaged, or the surface is rough, or you hit a gust. Bounce means you are airborne again. Airborne means you are not braking. Not braking means you are eating runway. Another 50 yards. Now you have 660. You are already behind. Third, control. You have to keep the aircraft pointed straight while you are doing all of this. Sounds simple. It is not. The runway surface is not perfect. It is concrete, yes, but it has cracks, it has patches, it has areas where the foundations settle differently. One wheel hits a rough spot, and suddenly the aircraft wants to pull left. You correct right. You overcorrect. Now the tail starts to swing. You are at 60 miles per hour with 35 tons of momentum, and if you let that tail come around, you are going to spin sideways, and the gear is going to collapse, and the aircraft is going to cartwheel, and everyone inside is going to die. So, you are managing 3 things: energy, distance, control, all at the same time, all while your crew is silent because they know better than to distract you, all while the runway end is rushing toward you at speeds your brain cannot quite process. And here is the part that kills people. Experience. You would think experience helps. It does not. Not here. Not on short runways. Let me show you 3 cases. 3 crashes. All from the same base. All within 6 months. All from after-action reports that were classified for 50 years. Case Alpha, December 1943. B-24 Liberator. Pilot, Captain James Hendricks. 800 combat hours. Veteran. Skilled. Respected. Returns from a mission over Germany. Aircraft is damaged but flyable. approaches the 800-yard runway. Everything looks stable. He comes in at 95 miles per hour. Standard approach speed for a B-24. Exactly what his training says to do. He touches down at the 100-yard mark. Good landing, firm but controlled. Applies brakes. The aircraft does not stop. He increases brake pressure. The aircraft shudders but keeps rolling. He goes to full brakes. The tires start smoking. The aircraft is decelerating, but not fast enough. At 600 yards, he realizes he is not going to make it. At 700 yards, he is still going 40 miles per hour. At 800 yards, he is still going 20. The aircraft leaves the runway, hits the dirt embankment beyond, and explodes. Fuel tanks rupture. Fire. 9 crew members. All dead. Official report. Pilot error. Excessive approach speed. But 95 miles per hour is what the manual says. That is what every instructor taught him. That is what he did successfully dozens of times on longer runways. The problem is not the pilot. The problem is that normal procedures do not work on short runways. Case Bravo, February 1944, B-17, Flying Fortress. Pilot, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, 300 combat hours. Younger, but sharp. Learns from mistakes. Heard about Captain Hendricks. Decides to come in slower. He approaches at 80 miles per hour. Below standard approach speed. Slower means more stopping distance available. Seems logical. At 200 feet, he hits a wind gust. The aircraft drops 10 feet in 1 second. He is now slow and low. He tries to add power to arrest the descent. The engines spool up, but it takes time. Time he does not have. The aircraft hits the runway hard. 70 feet short of the threshold. The landing gear collapses on impact. The aircraft skids on its belly, veers left, clips a parked vehicle, and cartwheels. 6 crew members dead. 3 survive with severe injuries. Official report. Pilot error. Unstable approach. But he was trying to avoid Captain Hendricks' mistake. He came in slower. And it killed him anyway. Case Charlie. April 1944. B-17. Flying Fortress. Pilot. First Lieutenant Robert Paulson. 500 combat hours. Careful. Methodical. Smart enough to learn from both previous crashes. He approaches at exactly 87 miles per hour. Not too fast, not too slow. The Goldilocks speed. He stabilizes early. Touchdown is perfect. 100 yards exactly. Speed is right. He applies brakes progressively, like the manual says. Smooth pressure. No jerking. And then, at 50 miles per hour, 300 yards into the rollout, the aircraft suddenly pulls hard to the right. Lieutenant Paulson corrects left. The pull intensifies. He tries to compensate. The aircraft starts to spin. He releases the brakes to regain control. The spin stops, but now he is rolling free with no braking at all. 400 yards of runway left. 40 miles per hour with no brakes. He tries the brakes again. Right brake catches. Left brake is dead. Attempts to use only the right brake to slow down while using the rudder to keep straight. It almost works. He gets the speed down to 20 miles per hour. But the asymmetric braking makes the aircraft drift left. He runs out of runway. The left main gear goes off the concrete onto the grass. The grass is soft. The gear sinks. The aircraft noses down. The propellers hit the ground. The engines tear loose. The fuselage breaks in half. 4 dead. 6 survive. Official report. Pilot error. Loss of directional control. But here is what the official report did not say. Here is what was buried in the maintenance logs and not discovered until 1998, when a researcher went through archived records. Left brake hydraulic failure, caused by shrapnel damage from the mission, creating a slow leak that only manifested under sustained braking and high heat. The kind of heat you get when you are trying to stop 30 tons in 800 yards. There was a service bulletin about this exact failure mode, Technical Bulletin 43-2. Issued in November 1943, it recommended a fix, a reinforced hydraulic line, cost per aircraft, $12. The fix was never implemented, marked as low priority, deferred due to war production schedules. 3 pilots, 3 different approach speeds, 3 different techniques. All 3 crashed. 1 was too fast, 1 was too slow. 1 was perfect. All 3 died, or most of their crews did. Because the runway did not care about their experience, did not care about their skill, did not care about their decisions. The runway cared about math, and the math did not work. Your eyes are lying to you. Right now, at 500 feet, looking down at that runway, your brain is doing something it evolved to do over millions of years. It is making a guess, a prediction, an estimate about distance and speed and whether you can make it. And your brain is wrong, not a little wrong, catastrophically wrong, because human depth perception was not designed for this. It was designed for running across the savannah, judging whether you could jump across a stream, deciding if that branch would hold your weight. Distances measured in feet, speeds measured in miles per hour on foot, close range, ground level, familiar scale, not for hurtling through three-dimensional space at 90 miles per hour, trying to judge whether 800 yards is enough to stop 35 tons of steel. From 500 feet up, that runway looks like it goes on forever. Your brain sees the far end and thinks plenty of room. At 300 feet, you start to get a nagging feeling. Maybe not quite as much room as you thought. At 100 feet, you realize the truth. The runway is short, way too short. But by 100 feet, you are committed. You cannot climb back out. You do not have the airspeed, you do not have the altitude, and if you try to add power suddenly with the aircraft configured for landing, you might stall and drop like a rock. So you continue. Because what else can you do? This is the runway illusion, and it kills people. But there is a second illusion that is even more dangerous. Weight. You think you know how much your aircraft weighs. You did the calculations before takeoff. You know your fuel load, your ammunition load, your crew, your equipment. You have a number. You trust that number. That number is wrong. Here is why. Before the mission, they loaded ammunition, standard load, 50 caliber rounds for the defensive guns. Then, at the last minute, someone decides you are going into heavy fighter territory. They add 2 extra cans. Nobody tells the pilot. Nobody updates the weight sheet. That is an extra 150 pounds. During the mission, you take battle damage. Shrapnel tears through the fuselage. Some of it exits, some of it does not. You have chunks of German anti-aircraft shells embedded in your airframe. You have no idea how much. Could be 50 pounds. Could be 200. You cannot see it. You cannot weigh it. But it is there. The battle damage also creates drag. Holes in the skin, bent control surfaces, a damaged engine nacelle that is no longer streamlined. Drag does not add weight, but it makes the aircraft behave like it is heavier. It needs more speed to stay airborne. More speed means more energy to dissipate. Energy means more distance to stop. You have wounded crew members. Private Johnson took shrapnel in the leg. He is not at his station anymore. He is lying in the back, and Corporal Martinez is back there with him trying to keep him alive. So now you have 2 crew members in the tail section instead of distributed throughout the aircraft. The center of gravity just shifted. The aircraft handles differently. It wants to drop the nose more in the flare. You have to compensate. That compensation changes your touchdown point. Your fuel gauges are lying too. Combat maneuvers, violent banks, negative G pushes, they slosh fuel around in the tanks. The float sensors get confused. The gauge says you have 400 gallons. You might have 300, you might have 500. You will not know until you land and they measure it, and by then it does not matter because you either made it or you did not. So you think your aircraft weighs 33,000 pounds. It actually weighs 34,200. You do not know this. You calculate your approach based on 33,000. You are wrong by 1,200 pounds. That is 4%. 4% does not sound like much. 4% is the difference between stopping with 50 yards to spare and running off the end at 15 miles per hour straight into a ditch. 4% kills you. Now, add the psychological weight. You have been flying for 13 hours. You are exhausted. Your body is running on adrenaline and coffee and the fumes of whatever breakfast you had before dawn. Your hands hurt from gripping the yoke. Your eyes hurt from scanning for fighters. Your back hurts from sitting in a freezing cockpit at altitude where the temperature is 40 below zero. You made it through the flak. You made it through the fighters. You made it through the target run where the entire sky turned into flying metal. You kept your crew alive. You kept the aircraft flying. You did everything right. And now you can see home. Not just the runway. Home. The place where you sleep, where you eat, where you write letters, where you are safe. Your brain floods with relief. Finally, it is over. You made it. And that relief is a trap, because relief makes you relax. Relaxation makes you sloppy. Sloppy makes you float an extra 2 seconds. Makes you misjudge the flare. Makes you touch down 50 yards long because you were already thinking about the debriefing, about food, about sleep. 50 yards you do not have. There's a recording, declassified in 2003, tower tape, from a landing attempt in March 1945. You can hear it. The voices. The tension. Pilot. Tower, Devil's Advocate on final. Tower. Roger, Devil's Advocate, wins 270 at 8, cleared to land. Pilot. Cleared to land. Devil's Advocate. 15 seconds of silence. Just the hiss of the radio. Co-pilot. Quiet, not keyed to transmit. We are coming in hot. Pilot. I have got it. Co-pilot. We are fast. We should go around. Pilot. Negative. We are committed. Co-pilot. Please. We are too fast. 5 seconds of silence. Co-pilot. Pull up. Pull up now. Pilot. Too late. 3 seconds of silence. Then a sound. Crumpling metal. Breaking. A short scream. Cut off. Then nothing. The investigation found that the pilot, Captain Richard Donovan, had landed on this runway 12 times before. 12 successful landings. He knew the runway. He knew the aircraft. He knew what he was doing. But this time, he was 600 pounds heavier than he calculated. He came in at 93 miles per hour instead of 87, and he touched down at the 150-yard mark instead of the 75-yard mark. Those 3 small errors compounded. He ran off the end of the runway at 22 miles per hour. The aircraft hit the embankment, flipped, and burned. 8 crew members, all dead. The co-pilot was right. They should have gone around, aborted the landing, climbed back up, tried again. But the pilot made a decision, a human decision. He thought he could make it. He had made it 12 times before. His experience told him he had it under control. His experience lied. Because experience on normal runways teaches you the wrong lessons. It teaches you that small errors are forgivable, that you have margin, that you can fix things late. 800-yard runway, there is no margin. Small errors are not forgivable. You cannot fix things late. And the worst part, the part that haunts anyone who listens to that recording, is the co-pilot knew. He saw it. He called it out. He begged the pilot to abort. And the pilot, experienced, confident, committed, said no. 3 seconds later, they were all dead. Now imagine you are in that cockpit. You are the pilot. You have flown 100 missions. You have landed on this runway before. You know what you are doing. Your co-pilot says you are too fast. Do you trust your experience? Or do you trust him? Do you commit? Or do you abort, knowing that aborting means flying around again on engines that might not survive another circuit, on fuel that might not last, with wounded crew who need medical attention now? There is no good answer. Both choices can kill you, and you have 3 seconds to decide. This is the psychological trap. Your eyes lie. Your weight is wrong. Your brain wants relief. Your experience teaches you bad habits. And the person next to you, the one voice that might save you, you have to decide in 3 seconds whether to trust them or override them. Most pilots overrode. Most pilots died. Until one pilot did something different. November 16, 1944. Aircraft B-17 Flying Fortress, serial number 4231790. Name painted on the nose. Devil's Advocate. Pilot, First Lieutenant Michael Kearns. Co-pilot, Second Lieutenant Thomas Brennan. Crew, 7 additional men. Mission, Schweinfurt. Ball-bearing factories, deep into Germany. The kind of mission where you count yourself lucky if you make it to the target, let alone back. They made it to the target. Flak was heavy. It always was over Schweinfurt. The Germans knew how important those factories were. They protected them with everything they had. The sky turned black with exploding shells. The aircraft shook so hard the instruments blurred. Engine number 3 took a hit, not fatal, but bad. Oil pressure dropping, cylinder head temperature climbing. They shut it down, feathered the prop. Now they are flying on 3 engines. Engine number 2 is not happy either. Running rough, backfiring occasionally. They nurse it, baby it. Keep it alive because they need it. The bomb run. Flak so thick you could walk on it. Lieutenant Kearns holds the aircraft steady while the bombardier lines up. Bombs away. The aircraft lurches up, suddenly lighter. They bank hard. Get out of there. Fighters on the way back. Focke-Wulf 190s. Fast, aggressive. They come in waves. The gunners are firing. Brass casings rattling on the deck. The smell of cordite fills the aircraft. Tracers everywhere. One fighter comes straight at them head-on, guns blazing. Kearns does not flinch. holds course. The fighter breaks off at the last second. They make it across the channel. England, home, safety. Except it is not over. Engine number 2 starts smoking. Really smoking. Black smoke trailing behind them. Temperature gauge pegged, they shut it down. Now they are on 2 engines. Out of 4. Hydraulics are questionable. They have pressure, but it is fluctuating. The gauges are twitching. Something is leaking. They do not know what. They do not know how bad. Fuel is lower than it should be. Not critical yet, but getting there. They might have taken a hit in one of the tanks. Small leak. Slow. But steady. And they have wounded. Waist gunner took shrapnel. Not life-threatening, but he is bleeding. He needs medical attention soon. They radio ahead. Declare emergency. Tower clears them for straight-in approach. Priority landing. Kearns knows this runway. He has landed here 24 times. He knows it is short. He knows it is tight. But he also knows he has done it before, in worse shape than this. He sets up the approach. 2 engines, both running. Not great, not terrible. Gear down, flaps down, hydraulics hold. Good. Airspeed, 88 miles per hour. By the book. Glide path, stable. Centered on the approach lights. Everything looks right. At 500 feet, a gust hits them. Crosswind, 15 knots from the left. The aircraft drifts right. Kearns corrects. Left bank, left rudder, brings it back to centerline. But now he is slightly high. The correction cost him glide path. Not much. 20 feet, but enough. At 300 feet, Brennan notices. We are high. Kearns nods. I see it. He could reduce power. Let the aircraft sink back onto the glide path. Standard procedure. But he is already on 2 engines. If he reduces power too much and one of them coughs, he will not have enough to recover. So he holds what he has. Lets the aircraft stay a little high. He will fix it in the flare. At 200 feet, another gust. Smaller this time. But it pushes them left of centerline. Kearns corrects again. Right bank. Right rudder. Now he is slightly right, slightly high, and slightly fast because he has not reduced power yet. 3 small errors. Brennan sees it. Mike, we are not set up. Kearns knows. He can feel it. The approach does not feel stable. It does not feel right. But they are at 200 feet. The runway is right there. He has already committed in his mind. He thinks he can salvage it. I have got it, he says. At 100 feet, he chops power. Flares. The aircraft floats. Too much speed. The extra 5 miles per hour he did not bleed off is keeping them airborne. 1 second. 2 seconds. They are floating down the runway, not touching. Brennan, quieter now. We are long. Kearns knows. He can see it. He is going to touch down way past where he should. But aborting now, at 50 feet with almost no power, on 2 engines that might not spool up fast enough, is a gamble. He decides to take the landing. He has salvaged worse. He is sure of it. Touchdown. 180 yards into the runway. He should have touched down at 75. He has already lost 105 yards. More than an eighth of the total runway. Gone. Before the wheels even hit, the aircraft settles, main gear first, then nose gear. Firm landing. Not smooth, but controlled. Kearns reaches for the brakes. Applies pressure. The aircraft shudders. He feels the brakes bite. Good. They are working. But they are not slowing fast enough. He increases pressure. More braking. The tires start complaining. He can hear them through the airframe. A high-pitched squeal. Airspeed. 75 miles per hour. Runway remaining. 600 yards. The math is not working. Brennan is watching the runway markers rush past. He is doing his own calculation. He does not say anything yet, but his hand moves to the throttles. Unconscious gesture, ready to push them forward if Kearns changes his mind and tries to go around. But at this speed, with this little runway behind them, going around is not an option anymore. Airspeed, 60 miles per hour. Runway remaining, 450 yards. They are slowing, but not fast enough. Kearns goes to full brakes. Maximum pressure. The aircraft shudders violently. The tail wants to lift. He can feel it. The nose is dipping. He has to ease off slightly, or the nose gear will collapse. Airspeed, 45 miles per hour. Runway remaining, 300 yards. The end of the runway is visible now. Not far away. Close. Too close. Brennan finally speaks. Mike, just his name. That is all he says. But the tone says everything. We are not going to make it. Kearns does not respond. He is fighting. Brakes as hard as he can without losing control, holding the aircraft straight. Every muscle tensed. Airspeed, 30 miles per hour. Runway remaining, 150 yards. The physics are simple, brutal, undeniable. At 30 miles per hour, they are covering 44 feet per second. They have 150 yards. That is 450 feet. They have 10 seconds. They need to decelerate from 30 miles per hour to 0 in 10 seconds. That is 3 miles per hour per second, with brakes that are already at maximum, with tires that are already smoking, with no more runway after this. Airspeed, 20 miles per hour. Runway remaining, 75 yards. 8 seconds. 15 miles per hour. 50 yards. 6 seconds. The crew in the back knows now. They can see the end coming through the windows. They brace. Some of them close their eyes. 10 miles per hour. 25 yards. 4 seconds. 5 miles per hour. 10 yards. 2 seconds. And then the aircraft does what physics says it must do. It runs out of runway while it still has momentum. The main gear leaves the concrete, hits dirt. The nose gear is still on the runway, but the mains are sinking into soft ground. The aircraft slews left. Kearns tries to correct, but there is no traction, no control. They hit the embankment at 4 miles per hour. Slow, almost gentle. The nose gear collapses. The aircraft pitches forward. The props hit the dirt. Engine number 1 tears loose from its mount. Engine number 4 bends the nacelle. The fuselage buckles behind the cockpit. Not catastrophic, but structural. The aircraft will never fly again. They slide 30 feet and stop. Silence. Then someone in the back starts laughing. Hysterical, disbelieving laughter. They are alive. Kearns sits there, hands still on the yoke, and says nothing. Brennan looks at him. We should have gone around. Kearns finally releases the yoke. His hands are shaking. I thought I had it. You did not. I know. 9 crew members, all alive. 1 additional injury, broken arm from the impact, but alive. The aircraft is a write-off. Total loss. The official report will say pilot error, failure to execute a go-around, unstable approach, continued past decision point. All of that is true. But here is what the report will not say. This pilot survived. Many others did not. And he survived because he got lucky. Lucky that the embankment was dirt and not concrete. Lucky that they hit it slow. Lucky that there was no fuel leak to cause a fire. Luck is not a strategy. And the terrifying thing is, Kearns did almost everything right. He is an experienced pilot. He made a reasonable decision based on his experience. He fought the aircraft all the way to the ground and stopped it as fast as he physically could. It was not enough, because the runway was too short, and 14 more pilots would die trying to figure out what Kearns could not, until one pilot looked at this problem and saw something everyone else missed. December 1944. A new pilot arrives at the base. Captain Robert Vandermeer. They call him Dutch. Nobody is quite sure why. His family is not from Holland. Best guess is someone misheard his last name once and it stuck. That is how these things work in the military. Dutch is 31 years old. Ancient by fighter pilot standards. Old even for a bomber pilot. Most of the guys flying these missions are 20, 22, fresh out of training with maybe a year of experience. Dutch has been flying since 1936, before the war. Civilian cargo in Alaska. Mail routes through mountain passes where the weather tries to kill you, and the terrain does not forgive mistakes. 8 years of flying the hard way. The kind of flying where you do not get to be sloppy, because sloppy means you hit a mountain and nobody finds your body until spring thaw. He has 127 combat missions. 127 times he took off and came back. That number is almost unheard of. Most pilots rotate out after 25. Some stay for 50. Dutch just kept flying. Never crashed. Not once. Not in training. Not in Alaska. Not in combat. Clean record. People think that means he is lucky. He is not lucky. He is methodical. On his first day at the base, he does not report to the squadron commander. He does not unpack. He does not introduce himself to his crew. He goes to the runway, just stands there, looks at it, walks the length of it, paces it off, stands at one end and looks at the other. Then he goes to the tower, asks to see the landing records from the past 6 months. The tower chief thinks this is weird, but Dutch has captain's bars, so he complies. Dutch sits there for 3 hours, reading every landing, every go-around, every incident. Then he goes to the crash investigation files, reads those too. By the end of the day, he has a notebook full of numbers, approach speeds, touchdown points, rollout distances, brake application rates, wind conditions, aircraft weights. His squadron mates think he is strange, antisocial, cold. They are not wrong. Dutch does not drink with them, does not play cards, does not talk much. When he does talk, it is about procedures, about numbers, about systems. He is not trying to make friends. He is trying to not die. On his second day, he watches 3 landings from the tower. All 3 are successful. All 3 aircraft stop safely. The pilots are good. They know what they are doing. Dutch sees something they do not. All 3 aircraft float before touchdown. Not a lot, just 1 or 2 seconds. The pilots came in with a little extra speed, just to be safe, and that extra speed made them float. All 3 touchdown long, past the ideal touchdown point. Not by much, 50 yards, 75 yards. All 3 use more runway than they need to, and all 3 stop with very little margin. One of them has maybe 30 yards to spare. That night, Dutch goes to the ground crew. The mechanics, the guys who fix the aircraft and patch the holes and clean the blood out of the fuselages. He asks them a question. How many go-arounds do you see? The crew chief, a sergeant named Murphy, shrugs. Not many. Maybe 1 a week. Out of how many landings? 100, 120. Dutch does the math. 1%. 1 in 100 pilots waves off and tries again. Why so few? Murphy lights a cigarette. Pilots feel pressure. Command wants aircraft turned around fast. Every minute we are refueling and rearming is a minute we are not bombing Germany. Go-arounds waste fuel, waste time. Plus, ego. Nobody wants to be the guy who could not stick the landing. What about the crashes? Murphy takes a long drag, exhales slowly. What about them? You ever notice a pattern? Sure. They come in too hot, touchdown too long, run out of runway. Ever tell the pilots that? Murphy laughs. No humor in it. We are mechanics. What do we know about flying? Dutch nods, says nothing, walks away. That night, he writes in his notebook. 5 rules. Simple, direct. No ambiguity. Rule 1. Stable by 300 feet or abort. Not 200. Not 100. 300. If the approach is not completely stable, airspeed right, glide path right, alignment right, at 300 feet altitude, do not continue. Go around, no exceptions. No judgment calls. No, maybe I can fix it. The gate is 300 feet. Either you are through it clean, or you are not. Rule 2. Touchdown zone is 50 to 100 yards. Not 1 to 200. Not 50 to 150. 50 to 100. That is where the wheels touch. If you are going to overshoot that zone, abort. You need every inch of the rest of that runway. You cannot give away 100 yards at the beginning and expect to make it up at the end. Rule 3. Speed is the enemy. Not stalling. Not dropping. Speed. Extra speed feels safe. It is not safe. It is death disguised as caution. Calculate your minimum safe approach speed for your actual weight, not your estimated weight. Your actual weight. Then add exactly 5 miles per hour. Not 10, not 15, 5. That is your margin. That is all you get. Rule 4. Smooth is optional. Stopped is mandatory. Nobody dies from a firm landing. People die from gentle landings that use too much runway. If the choice is touchdown exactly where you need to but it feels rough, or touchdown smooth but 50 yards long, take the rough landing every single time. Rule 5. Test your brakes at 500 feet. Tap them. Just a quick pulse. Feel the response. If one side feels different than the other, you have asymmetric brakes. You have a problem. You need to know about it now, at 500 feet with options, not at 50 miles per hour when you are committed. He types up the rules, makes copies, tapes one inside his cockpit where he can see it during approach. The other pilots see it. Some of them laugh. Dutch has a checklist for landing. What is next? A checklist for breathing. Dutch does not care what they think. On December 9th, he flies his first mission from this base. Leipzig. Long flight, heavy flak. They take damage. Hydraulic leak. One engine running rough. Typical mission. On the return, he sets up his approach exactly the way his rules say. At 500 feet, he tests his brakes. Both respond evenly. Good. At 400 feet, he checks his stability. Airspeed is 83 miles per hour. His aircraft weight is 34,000 pounds. His calculated minimum safe speed is 78. Plus 5 is 83. Perfect. Glide path is good. Alignment is good. At 300 feet, he does a final check. Everything's stable. He continues. At 200 feet, a gust hits. The aircraft drifts slightly left of center line. Without hesitation, Dutch adds power. Back up, goes around. His co-pilot, Lieutenant Davis, looks at him. We were fine. That was a tiny drift. Gate is 300 feet. We were not stable. We go around. But the approach was 95% good. 95% does not stop the aircraft. 100% does. Tower radios. Devil's advocate. Say status. Executing go-around. Will re-enter pattern. There is a pause. Then the tower chief, who has been doing this job for 2 years and has seen what happens when people do not go around, says something he almost never says. Good call, devil's advocate. Second approach. Dutch sets it up again. By the numbers. At 300 feet, everything is perfect. Airspeed exactly 83. Glide path exactly right. Centerline alignment within 2 degrees. He continues. Flare at 20 feet. Power to idle. The aircraft settles. Touchdown at 78 yards. Exactly where he planned. Brakes. Progressive pressure. No slamming. No jerking. Smooth increase. The aircraft decelerates. Steady. Predictable. At 40 miles per hour, they pass the 500-yard marker. At 20 miles per hour, they pass the 700-yard marker. At 10 miles per hour, they pass the 750-yard marker. They stop at 760 yards. 40 yards to spare. Davis looks at him. That was boring. Dutch unbuckles his harness. Boring keeps you alive. Over the next 3 months, Dutch flies 31 missions from this base. He executes 3 go-arounds, 2 for unstable approaches. 1 for brake asymmetry he caught at 500 feet. He has 0 crashes, 0 near misses, 0 pucker moments where it was close. 6 other pilots ask him to teach them his method. He does, takes them through the rules, flies with them, critiques their approaches. Those 6 pilots, over the same 3-month period, fly a combined 89 missions. They execute 12 go-arounds. They have 0 crashes. The rest of the squadron flies 212 missions, 4 crashes, 11 near misses where the aircraft stopped with less than 10 yards remaining. The numbers are undeniable. Dutch's method works. In February 1945, he writes a letter to Air Command. Subject: Short Runway Protocol Recommendations. He includes his 5 rules. He includes statistical evidence. He explains, clearly and without emotion, that these procedures will save lives. The response comes 3 weeks later. Under review. That is all it says. Under review, Dutch waits. Nothing happens. He writes again. This time, he includes projections. Based on current crash rates, he predicts 40 more fatalities by the end of the war if nothing changes. This letter is returned to him. In the margin, someone has stamped, received. No response. No acknowledgement. No action. Dutch takes his returned letter. Writes in his own margin, in pencil, they would rather bury pilots than admit the runway is the problem. He files the letter in his personal papers, keeps flying, keeps teaching anyone who will listen. By the time the war ends in May, the final tally is 43 pilots dead from short runway crashes at this base. Dutch's prediction was 40. He was off by 3. His method had a 100% success rate for anyone who used it. Command never implemented it. And Dutch's letter, with his penciled margin note, would not be seen again for 44 years. Because someone made sure it disappeared. March 23, 1945. Dutch is coming home from Berlin. Not just any mission. Berlin, the most defended city in Europe. Flak so thick the sky turns solid. Fighters everywhere. The kind of mission where making it to the target is an accomplishment, and making it home is a miracle. But Dutch makes it home. The mission was clean, by his standards anyway. Some flak damage, nothing critical. All 4 engines running, hydraulics good, fuel sufficient. No wounded crew. A good day. He sets up his approach exactly the way he always does. By the numbers, his 5 rules. No deviations. No shortcuts. At 500 feet, he tests his brakes. Left brake, responds. Right brake, responds. Both feel even. Both feel good. He continues. At 300 feet, he checks stability. Airspeed, 84 miles per hour. His weight today is 33,800 pounds. Safe speed is 79, plus 5 is 84. Perfect. Glide path, centered on the lights. Alignment, 2 degrees right of center line, within tolerance. Everything is stable. He is through the gate. He continues. Final approach. Smooth, controlled. Everything Dutch has done 100 times before. Flare. Touchdown. 82 yards. Right in his zone. Exactly where he wants to be. Brakes. He applies progressive pressure. Feels them bite. The aircraft starts decelerating. Everything is going exactly according to plan. And then, at 50 miles per hour, 300 yards into the rollout, something changes. The aircraft pulls right. Not a lot, but noticeable. Dutch corrects left. The pull intensifies. He has felt this before. In Alaska, flying cargo through crosswinds, you get a sense for it. The aircraft is not responding right. Something is wrong with the brakes. I have asymmetric braking, he says. Davis, his co-pilot, checks the gauges. Hydraulic pressure is dropping on the left side. Dutch processes this instantly. Left brake is failing. Slowly, not all at once. The hydraulic line has a leak, probably shrapnel damage from the mission. Small hole. Was not leaking enough to notice on the ground or in flight. But now, under sustained braking, under heat, the leak is getting worse. He has maybe 10 seconds before the left brake is completely gone. 400 yards of runway left. 50 miles per hour. If he keeps using both brakes, the left one will fade completely, and the right one will spin the aircraft. At 50 miles per hour, a spin means the gear collapses and they cartwheel. Decision time. He does something that feels completely wrong. He releases both brakes. All braking stops. The aircraft is now rolling freely at 50 miles per hour, slowing only from drag and friction, which is almost nothing. Davis looks at him like he has lost his mind. Dutch, what are you doing? Left brake is gone. If I use the right one alone, we will spin. But we are not slowing down. I know. 350 yards of runway left. 48 miles per hour. Dutch counts to 3. Lets the brake system equalize. Lets the pressure stabilize. Then he tries the right brake. Just a pulse. Quick tap. It holds. Firm. Responsive. Right brake is good, he says. He applies it again. Short pulses. On, off, on, off. Not continuous pressure. Just enough to slow them down without creating so much lateral force that the aircraft spins. But the aircraft is drifting left. The asymmetric braking, even in pulses, is pulling them. Dutch uses the rudder to counter. Right rudder. Keeps them straight. This is not a technique anyone teaches. This is improvisation. Managing a failure in real time with physics and feel. 300 yards left. 35 miles per hour. The left wheel is getting close to the runway edge. If it goes off onto the grass, the soft ground will grab it and spin them. Dutch pulses the right brake harder. Longer pulses. More aggressive. The aircraft shudders. The right tire is screaming, but they are slowing. 200 yards. 28 miles per hour. He can see the end now. Close. Too close. More brake. The aircraft drifts farther left. The left main gear is on the white line at the edge of the runway. 6 inches from grass. 150 yards. 20 miles per hour. Dutch makes a choice. He accepts the drift. Lets the aircraft track left. Uses all his focus on braking. Maximum pulses on the right. As much as the tire will take without locking. 100 yards. 15 miles per hour. The left main gear touches grass. Just barely. The edge of the tire, he can feel the difference in rolling resistance. The aircraft wants to pull harder left. He counters with full right rudder. The nose swings right even as the main gear drifts left. The aircraft is crabbing sideways, tracking at an angle. 50 yards. 10 miles per hour. It is going to be close. 25 yards. 6 miles per hour. The aircraft is mostly on grass now, on the left side, still on concrete on the right, still slowing, still under control, barely. 10 yards. 3 miles per hour. 5 yards. 1 mile per hour. They stop. The left main gear is completely on grass. The right main gear is on concrete. The nose gear is centered on the white line. 22 yards from the end of the runway. Dutch sits there, hands still on the controls. Heart rate finally starting to come down. Davis is staring at him. How did you know to do that? I did not. I guessed. That was not a guess. That was luck. If the right brake had failed too, we would be dead. They shut down the engines. The ground crew comes out. Inspection finds the problem immediately. Left brake hydraulic line, shrapnel puncture, small hole, was leaking slowly during the flight. Under the heat and pressure of sustained braking, the leak got worse. By the time they stopped, the line was empty. No fluid, no pressure, no brake. The crew chief, Murphy, looks at the damage, looks at where the aircraft stopped, looks at Dutch. You stopped this aircraft on one brake? Did not have a choice. Most pilots would have spun it into the ground. Most pilots did not learn to fly in Alaska. Murphy shakes his head, walks away, muttering. That night, Dutch goes to the maintenance records, pulls the file on Case Charlie, the crash from April 1944, the one where the official report said pilot error, loss of directional control. He reads the maintenance notes. Post-crash inspection. Left brake hydraulic line failure. The same failure he just survived. He goes to the squadron commander, shows him the evidence. This is what killed Lieutenant Paulson, not pilot error, brake failure. The commander reads the report. This was a year ago. I know, but we have been blaming dead pilots for a mechanical problem. The report says pilot error. The report is wrong. The commander does not like being told he is wrong. Nobody does. Especially not by a captain telling a lieutenant colonel. What do you want me to do about it? Issue a service bulletin. Pre-landing brake check mandatory. Pulse the brakes at 500 feet. If they feel uneven, wave off. Get the aircraft on the ground, get it inspected. We already have a bulletin about brake inspections. Ground inspections. Not in flight. You cannot find a small leak on the ground. The system has to be under load, under heat. That only happens during landing. The commander thinks about this. What else? Brake application technique. Do not ride the brakes hard for the entire rollout. Pulse them. Progressive pressure. Let the system cool. Continuous high pressure creates heat. Heat expands the metal. Expansion creates leaks. You want me to change how every pilot in this squadron brakes? I want you to stop losing pilots to a problem we can fix. The commander stares at him. Long silence. Write it up. I will forward it. Dutch writes it up. 3 pages. Clear. Technical. Supported by evidence. He submits it in April 1945. The war ends in May. In those final 2 months, after the brake check procedure is implemented, there are 2 crashes at the base. Neither one is brake-related. One is an engine failure on approach. One is a pilot who ignored the 300-foot gate and tried to salvage an unstable approach. In the 2 months before Dutch's procedure, there were 11 crashes. The numbers speak for themselves. Now, if you have been watching up to this point, you might be thinking this is where the story ends. Dutch figured it out. Command listened. Lives were saved. Happy ending. Except that is not what happened. Because what happened after the war, when the reports were compiled and the investigations were closed and the families were notified, is somehow even worse than the crashes themselves. But before we get there, if you are finding this story as fascinating or as infuriating as I am, do me a favor, subscribe to this channel, hit the bell, because these stories, the ones that take 70 years to surface, the ones that make you question what else we do not know, this is what we do here. And leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Should Dutch have been recognized for this? Should the families have been told the truth? I want to know what you think, because this next part is going to make you angry. Because in 1946, the War Department did something that changed how we remember these pilots. And not in a good way. 1946. The war is over. The parades are finished. The soldiers are coming home, the ones who made it anyway. The country is trying to move forward. To forget, in a nondescript office building in Washington, a team of analysts is going through records, thousands of them. Every aircraft loss, every casualty, every incident from 6 years of war. They are compiling statistics, lessons learned, what went right, what went wrong, what to do differently next time. In July, they publish an internal report. Not for the public, not even for most of the military. This is eyes only, command level. The kind of document that gets filed away and forgotten, except someone kept a copy. And in 2001, that copy was declassified. The report is 347 pages long. Most of it is what you would expect. Combat losses, training accidents, mechanical failures, weather incidents. But on page 212, there is a section that most people skip over because the title is boring. Non-combat operational losses due to preventable systemic factors. Bureaucratic language. designed to be boring, designed to make you not want to read it. But here's what it says. Between January 1943 and May 1945, there were 127 deaths classified as preventable mechanical failures. Preventable meaning the problem was documented before the incident, and a fix was available but not implemented. 127. Not combat, not heroic last stands, not going down fighting. Preventable. The report breaks it down by cause. Oxygen system failures, 18 deaths. Electrical fire due to known faulty wiring, 22 deaths. Engine mount failure due to deferred maintenance, 14 deaths. And then there is the category that takes up 2 full pages. Landing accidents due to runway inadequacy and brake system defects, 68 deaths. 68. The report explains in that same bland bureaucratic language that these deaths occurred because runways were too short for the aircraft using them and because brake systems had a known defect that was not corrected due to production priorities. Then comes the part that should have been a scandal. Quote, given the current post-war climate and the necessity of maintaining public confidence in military leadership, disclosure of preventable deaths is deemed inadvisable. Recommendation: maintain existing casualty notifications without amendment. Read that again. Disclosure inadvisable. They knew. They knew 68 pilots died because of problems that could have been fixed. And they decided not to tell anyone, not the families, not the public, not Congress, because it would undermine confidence. So, what did the families get instead? A letter, formal, typed, signed by a commanding officer who probably never met their son or husband or brother. We regret to inform you, killed in action. Service to country, grateful nation. Deepest sympathies. And for cause of death, aircraft accident. That is it. Aircraft accident. No mention that the runway was too short. No mention that the brake defect was documented in 1943 and could have been fixed for $12 per aircraft. No mention that someone ran the numbers and decided their son's life was not worth $12 times 10,000 aircraft. No mention that this death was not bad luck or combat or the fortunes of war. It was a choice. Someone chose not to fix the brakes. Someone chose not to extend the runway. Someone chose to classify these deaths as unavoidable when they were, by the military's own admission, preventable. And then someone chose to hide that fact for 55 years. Now, Dutch knew some of this. He did not have access to that report, but he knew the pattern. He knew the crashes were preventable. He tried to tell command. He wrote letters. He submitted procedures. And when those letters went nowhere, when his procedures were ignored, he did something that could have gotten him court-martialed. He wrote to the families. Not all of them. He did not know all of them. But the pilots he knew, the ones he flew with, the 3 who died using techniques he could have taught them if they had asked. He wrote to their families and told them the truth. Against orders. Against protocol. Against every regulation about operational security and discretion. He told them their son did not die because he lacked skill. He died because the military knew there was a problem and chose not to fix it. Those letters are lost, destroyed, probably, either by the families who did not want to believe it, or by the military if they found out. But one survived. In 2015, a man named Thomas Brennan donated his grandfather's papers to the National World War II Museum. His grandfather was Second Lieutenant Thomas Brennan, Dutch's co-pilot, the one who flew with him the day the brake failed. In those papers was a letter, not to Brennan's family, to someone else's. A pilot named Richards, who crashed in February 1945. The letter is typed, single-spaced, 1 page. Formal, but not cold. It says, I am writing to you against military guidance and possibly against regulation, but I believe you deserve to know the truth about how your son died. He did not die due to lack of skill or courage. He died because he was asked to land an aircraft on a runway that was inadequate, using brake systems with a known defect, and when those systems failed, he had no margin for error. The failure was not his. The failure was ours. Those of us who knew and did nothing, or tried and were ignored. Your son deserved better. I am sorry we could not give it to him. It is signed, Captain Robert Vandermeer, United States Army Air Forces. No rank protocol, no official letterhead, just his name. The museum curator who processed the donation said something in an interview that stuck with me. She said, "This is not a military document. This is a confession." Dutch carried that guilt, not for the crashes. He could not have prevented those, but for not fighting harder, not making more noise, not forcing command to listen. He kept flying his method, kept teaching anyone who would listen, kept his perfect record, 127 missions. 0 crashes, but 43 other pilots did not make it. And Dutch knew, mathematically, statistically, that if his procedures had been mandatory, most of them would have. So why were his procedures not mandatory? That is the question, is it not? He had the data. He had the proof. He had a 100% success rate, and command said, under review. There are a few possibilities. Maybe they did not believe him. One captain with an unorthodox method? Why should we change doctrine for him? Except 6 other pilots used his method with the same results. So that explanation does not hold. Maybe they thought it was too complicated, too hard to teach. Except it is 5 rules. 5. And they are simpler than most of what pilots already have to remember. Maybe they thought it would make pilots too cautious, too many go-arounds, too much wasted time and fuel. Except Dutch's students had a go-around rate of 13% and a crash rate of 0. The rest of the squadron had a go-around rate of 1% and a crash rate of 2%. You do the math on which one wastes more resources. So, what is left? Ego, bureaucracy, the institutional inertia that makes large organizations resist change even when change would save lives. Or maybe something worse. Maybe admitting Dutch was right meant admitting command was wrong. Admitting the runway was inadequate. Admitting the brakes were defective. Admitting 68 pilots died preventable deaths. And once you admit that, you have to explain why you did not fix it sooner. You have to explain why production schedules were more important than $12 brake line upgrades. You have to explain why strategic positioning was more important than extending a runway. You have to explain acceptable losses. And that explanation makes you look like you valued metal and concrete more than you valued men. So instead you classify it. You bury it. You stamp it under review and hope the war ends before anyone asks too many questions. And when the war does end, you write a report that says disclosure inadvisable, and you file it away for 55 years. Dutch's letter, the one with his recommendations and his casualty projections, disappeared from official records. It resurfaced in 1989. A researcher found it in a misfiled box at the National Archives. It had been stamped, received, but there was no reply attached, no follow-up, no action taken. The researcher published a paper about it, got some attention in aviation history circles. The Air Force was asked for comment. Response: the procedures described are consistent with modern stabilized approach concepts, which were developed through post-war analysis and have been standard practice since the 1960s. Notice what they did not say. They did not say Dutch invented it. They did not say his recommendations were ignored. They did not say 68 pilots might have lived if someone had listened. They said it is consistent with modern concepts, as if those concepts appeared out of nowhere, as if nobody figured it out first, as if Dutch's name is not on a letter dated February 1945 explaining exactly what modern aviation now teaches as gospel. Dutch died in 2007, 89 years old. Arlington National Cemetery, military honors. A few dozen people at the funeral, mostly family. His headstone says, Captain Robert Vandermeer, United States Army Air Forces, Distinguished Flying Cross. 127 combat missions. It does not say, develop the stabilized approach concept that is now taught to every pilot in the world. It does not say, had a 100% success rate when everyone else was dying. It does not say, tried to save lives and was ignored. His grandson spoke at the funeral. He said his grandfather never talked about being a hero, never bragged about his record, never sought recognition. He talked about the 43. That is what he called them. The 43. The pilots who died at that runway, whose names Dutch memorized, whose faces he remembered. He carried them until the day he died. And the military, the institution he served, the command structure he trusted, made sure his contribution was forgotten. Because remembering Dutch means remembering what they did, and what they did not do. The runway still exists. Not as it was. They extended it in 1947, added 1,600 yards. Now it is 2,400 yards total, plenty of room. More than enough for any aircraft that uses it. It is a civilian airport now. Small regional flights, private planes, flight training. On a quiet afternoon, you can stand at one end and see the other, and it looks peaceful, almost serene. There is nothing there that tells you what happened. No markers, no plaques, no indication that this strip of concrete has a body count. Until 2018. A local historical society, the kind of group that obsesses over forgotten stories, petitioned to have a memorial installed. Small, tasteful, just a stone with a plaque. The text they proposed was simple. In memory of those who fell at home, 1943 to 1945. The airport authority approved it. The memorial was installed in June 2018. Gray granite, bronze plaque. Nice enough. But there are no names on it. The Historical Society wanted names. They had a list, 43 pilots, verified through military records, crash reports, cemetery databases. They knew who died. They knew when. They knew where they were buried. The airport authority said no. Why? Privacy concerns. Privacy concerns. For men who have been dead for 70 years. For families who, in most cases, no longer exist. For a matter of public record that anyone with internet access can look up in 20 minutes. The Historical Society pushed back. They filed petitions. They wrote letters. They contacted the families they could find, asked for permission to use the names. Every family they reached said yes. Use the name. Tell the story. People should know. The airport authority still said no. So did the Air Force, when asked. Their official statement, released in 2019. While we honor the service and sacrifice of all who served, the addition of individual names to memorials requires extensive verification processes and consideration of surviving family wishes. This matter remains under review. Under review. The same words that killed Dutch's recommendations in 1945. The same words that buried the truth for 74 years. As of today, 2025, the memorial sits there with no names. Just that single sentence. In memory of those who fell at home. Generic. Safe. Meaningless to anyone who does not already know the story. And that, I think, is the point. Because names make it real. Names make it personal. Names make you ask questions. Who was he? How old was he? Where was he from? Did he die? And once you start asking those questions, you get answers. And some of those answers are uncomfortable. He died because the runway was too short and command knew it. He died because the brakes were defective and the fix was deferred. He died because someone decided his life was worth less than $12 and some production time. Those answers make people angry. Make them ask who decided. Make them want accountability. Easier to have no names, no questions, no accountability. Just a rock that says something vague about sacrifice and move on. But here is what they cannot erase. Dutch's logbook still exists. Donated to the Smithsonian in 2008, 1 year after he died. His family did not know what else to do with it. Figured a museum would appreciate it. It sat in storage for 11 years. Nobody looked at it. Just another logbook from another pilot. Interesting to historians, maybe, but not priority. Until 2019. A researcher named Dr. Elizabeth Corwin was going through archived materials for a book she was writing about wartime aviation safety. She found the logbook, started reading, and she realized what she was looking at. Every flight Dutch made, he logged. Not just the basics, detailed notes, weather, aircraft condition, approach speeds, touchdown distances, brake performance, go-around decisions. And in the margins, in his handwriting, observations, patterns he noticed, techniques he developed, procedures he tested. It was not just a logbook, it was a manual. A how-to guide for surviving short runways, written in real time by someone who actually did it. Dr. Corwin cross-referenced the entries with crash reports from the same time period. The correlation was undeniable. Flights where Dutch used his procedures. 0 crashes. Flights where other pilots did not. 43 crashes. She published a paper, The Stabilized Approach, One Pilot Solution to World War II's Deadliest Runway. It was published in the Journal of Aviation History, 2019. You can find it online if you search for it. The paper got attention. Not a lot. Aviation history is not exactly mainstream news. But enough. A few articles. Some academic discussions. The FAA was asked to comment. Their response, interesting historical note. The principles described are consistent with current training standards, which emphasize stable approaches and go-around discipline. Again, consistent with current standards. No mention of Dutch. No acknowledgement that he figured it out 80 years ago. No retroactive credit. Dr. Corwin pushed. She contacted the FAA directly, said, "Look, this man invented your stabilized approach concept. Do not you think he deserves recognition?" The FAA's position: modern aviation procedures are developed through extensive research and analysis by many contributors over time. While historical accounts are valuable, crediting specific individuals for broad concepts is complex. Translation: we are not giving him credit. Why not? Maybe because giving Dutch credit means acknowledging that the procedures existed in 1945 and were not adopted, which means acknowledging that people died unnecessarily for 30 years until the aviation industry caught up to what one pilot already knew. That is a bad look. Easier to pretend it evolved naturally. Collective wisdom. Lessons learned over time. Not one guy in a freezing cockpit doing math in the margins of his logbook while command ignored him. Dutch's family knows the truth now. They read Dr. Corwin's paper. They have the logbook back, on loan from the Smithsonian. They keep it in a safe. His grandson, Michael, the one who spoke at the funeral, is 83 now. I spoke with him last year while researching this story. He told me something his grandfather said to him once, late in life. Dutch did not talk about the war much, but one night after a few drinks, he said this: "I did not save anyone. I just refused to die stupidly." The real heroes are the 43 who did not have the choice to refuse. Michael said his grandfather carried guilt about that until the end. Felt like he should have done more, should have fought harder, should have made command listen. I asked Michael if he thinks his grandfather deserves recognition. He said, "I think the 43 deserve recognition. My grandfather got to live. They did not." Names should be on that memorial, not his. But here is the thing. Dutch and the 43 are the same story. You cannot honor one without acknowledging the other. You cannot say Dutch was brilliant without asking why his brilliance was ignored. You cannot say the 43 were heroes without asking why they died preventable deaths. And you cannot put their names on a memorial without admitting that someone knew, someone chose, someone let it happen. That is why there are no names. Because names demand truth. And truth demands answers. And the people who would have to provide those answers are long dead, but the institutions they represented are still here, still protecting reputations, still managing optics, still saying under review when they mean never. So where does that leave us? With a runway that is plenty long now, with a memorial that says nothing, with a logbook in a museum basement that proves everything, with 43 families who still do not have the full story, with one family that does but cannot get anyone to listen, and with you, because you know now, you know what happened. You know who Dutch was. You know what he did. You know why it mattered. And you know that 75 years later, the story is still not over. The FAA will not credit him. Fine. The Air Force will not acknowledge the cover-up. Expected. The airport will not put names on the memorial. Typical. But we can tell the story. We can say the names. Lieutenant Richards, Lieutenant Paulson, Captain Hendricks, Lieutenant Webb, Captain Donovan, and 38 others whose names are in the records if you look. And Captain Robert Dutch Vandermeer, who lived because he refused to accept that death was inevitable, who taught others to refuse it too, who tried to save more and was ignored, who died without recognition, carrying the names of men he could not save. That is the story they tried to bury. But some truths do not stay buried. This is World War II uncovered. This is where we tell the stories that took decades to surface, the ones that are inconvenient, the ones that ask uncomfortable questions. If you think these stories matter, subscribe, share this, leave a comment with your thoughts, because the more people who know, the harder it is to keep saying under review. Next time, the frozen altitude crisis. When the sky itself started shutting down the aircraft, and one gauge told the truth everyone ignored. Another impossible return. Another buried solution. Another pilot who refused to die stupidly. Until then, remember Dutch. Remember the 43. And remember that boring saves lives.